Since the beginning days of the distribution of information, boardrooms have been trying to control narratives, whether domestic or international. This has only gotten worse with the advent of the internet. Consolidated newsrooms, consolidated media companies, where 90% of the news we get, whether it's online or on TV or podcasts, etc., come out of 6 companies. This is where we're at today. When that's the norm, it's not absurd to think that they've taken over every single truth, turned it around, and corrupted it. It becomes easier to digest that a confused populace is easier to control, to divide, and to direct in the ways that the boardrooms view as necessary. It's 2020, people. It's time we realize this, because we are the news now. We have the ability to broadcast the information directly from our phones, from our computers, unfiltered and truthful. Because the truth is God, and God is the truth. And when you had man intervening in the message, it leads to the abomination of society that we see today. Let's get into episode 4. So in the days leading up to 2020, as I'm recording this, we have a couple of days before we have our Happy New Year celebrations, right? I've been looking into a lot of these prophetic YouTube channels, whether it's Kim Clement or Jonathan Kahn or Perry Stone, the list goes on. And each of them talk about this year, 2020, in 2 ways. They talk about the year in the Hebrew calendar versus the Gregorian calendar. The way we look at 2020, the first thing that comes to mind is crystal clear vision, right? We can look at that in a lot of different deep ways and try to explain that, oh wow, society is going into a clear awakening in the next year. And I believe that's the case. You know, it didn't have much to do with the year itself. It had much more to do with what Trump has been doing the last 3 years and what QAnon has been talking about for the last 3 years. QAnon does mention multiple times that it's going to be biblical. And it's not a hyperbolic statement when that's the case, because it seems like the Hebrew prophetic words for this year align perfectly with that message. It's a year of the mouth, according to the Hebrew calendar. The year of the mouth, where we, society, the citizens, the people, God's children, finally stand up to these power structures in media and in Hollywood and etc. It goes on, and in politics, and we speak our truth and demand action. It's going to be a beautiful year ahead. Incredible. Eye-opening for a lot. A lot of people will be shocked by what they find out. There will be a lot of exposure of corruption, a lot of exposure of people's true nature and intentions. People who had been idolized by a lot in society, especially by the media, made to look something holier than thou, bigger than you. And the truth is going to set all of us free. When I started off this episode, I was thinking, it's been a quieter week. What am I going to talk about? And last week I ended on this idea that maybe we should talk about the more meta concepts, the bigger changes that we'll be experiencing as a whole, as a collective in humanity, that a lot of people seem to kind of skirt around. We focus so much in the detail of the news every day. We focus on what's happening in this county and what's happening in this country and in this capital. These highlighted incidents that happen. And usually they're negative incidents, right? And told to us through negative lenses. But now, this concept of 2020, everybody that's listening here, whether it's one person or 10 people or 100 people, you have to take into account the responsibility that you hold in your hand to wake people up. If we're all brothers and sisters, right? Liberals want you to think, no borders, we're all brothers, we're all family. The truth is, we are all family. That doesn't mean we shouldn't have borders. Without borders, you have no nations. Without nations, you have no prosperity. Without prosperity, you have no faith in your brother and sister. You create more chaos than you fix. But in the case of humanity, we need to wake people up. I love my brothers and my sisters for that reason. I don't want to see my neighbor struggle. I don't want to see my friend from college that I haven't spoken to in 10 years go through hard times. That type of thinking is what needs to permeate society from this point on. I want to give you an example that just happened. As I'm recording this on Sunday the 29th, 2 days ago. President Trump had been retweeting a lot of accounts. Among these accounts were, of course, your usual QAnon followers that he was retweeting. Wink, wink. Finally, Business Insider picked up on that, by the way. The mainstream finally picked up on the fact that Trump's been retweeting QAnon for at least a month, but they focused on what he retweeted on Friday. You and I, if you follow Q and if you understand what's been happening, the coincidence is mathematically impossible. The quantity of proofs are mathematically impossible at this point. So Business Insider points this out, but they forget to mention one thing. And this is something that Twitter had to acknowledge to CNN Saturday. Among these tweets, our president, the greatest of all time, President Trump, retweeted an article that had the name of the alleged whistleblower, the whistleblower that never blew any whistle, Eric Ciaramella, if I'm pronouncing that right. Here's what happened with Twitter, though. That tweet didn't show up on Friday. We didn't know about this tweet. We found out when it actually popped up on his feed on Saturday that there was a glitch in the Twitter system that deleted the retweet immediately after he retweeted it. Guys, do you understand what we're talking about here? In 2017, I don't know if you remember this, but Donald Trump's Twitter went down for, I think, 45 minutes, if I'm not mistaken? It was deleted off the face of Twitter. And that was the President of the United States' Twitter account. So to talk about this concept of media and narrative being controlled by these corrupt people, the power that they claimed or they wished they had to yield on our president and on his only megaphone to the people that is unfiltered is incredible to me. It's unbelievable. It's like somebody in the White House telling Donald Trump, you can't get into the Oval Office today. We're going to stand right in front of this door. We're not going to let you in to do your work that the people elected you in to do. They call this a glitch. They must think we're stupid. They really must think we have no concept of truth and lies and their corruption. Unfortunately, guys, there are people out there that buy this. Now, granted, they're the minority. We are the majority now. MAGA is the majority in this country. We don't get the voice or the recognition that we should have because of these companies being owned by the establishment. But you should know that the enemy of the truth has been in control for at least 100 years. The J.P. Morgans, the CNNs, the DuPont family. You'll notice a lot of these establishment people had their own mouthpieces, their own media outlets throughout the ages. They understood the power of narratives. They understood the power of divide and conquer. Leading up to the 2016 election, everybody that liked Trump was made out to look like a racist, Islamophobe, sexist, misogynist, all of these words that they've also come up with to describe society and to build society as they wish it to look like. Unfortunately for them, they underestimated our intelligence. This glitch, Twitter, you're going to pay a price for. Deleting our president's Twitter account, you're going to pay a price for it. Now, since we're on the topic of enemies of the truth and evil people running these social media companies, it was announced this week that Sergey Brin and Larry Page, the founders of Google, that were running the Alphabet company, stepped down. Now, if you follow Q, you know that none of these companies, Google, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of these guys, all of them, YouTube, they're paying a price for everything they've done. We don't see it on the news. We don't see the Justice Department kicking doors down and dropping subpoenas on these people. But they're at work. They're doing their good work. These two founders stepped down, and Punchai, the CEO of Google, rises up to now oversee the entire operation. Count how many resignations of CEOs have gone down in the last year. 2019 saw a record number of CEO resignations across all industries. All industries, from food to technology to social media, it goes on and on. 1,300 CEOs in 2019 alone stepped down, and you tell me nothing is happening on the justice front? I'm with you when we get frustrated on the idea that we haven't seen people get arrested yet. We haven't seen indictments falling on these people's heads. But patience is the biggest virtue. We don't behave like the enemy. We don't drop accusations, unfounded accusations on our political rivals. We don't consider someone guilty until found innocent, like these KGB wannabe liberals want to act. We look at the evidence and follow the evidence and make sure that we have airtight cases to put people away for years, if not their entire lives. That's not saying we don't carry out the death penalty on some of these treasonous people, but the gravity of having these two people stepping down from Google, knowing the role they played in 2016 and beyond, is incredible. Things are happening at Google that we can't talk about here. We already know the government's ability to keep secrets from us with their classification markings and compartmentalized departments. All these massive corporations have the same standards. They have more leaks than the government does, sure, but, look at all the whistleblowers that have come out of Google. 8chan is filled with people that are claiming they work at Google and recognizing that Q is not playing around, that people are paying a price in Google, in the inside of the building. The next year is going to be filled with the exposure, and I'll tell you why. Here's the biggest reason. No country, no civilization, imagine the weight of this, can stand when the public has no faith in its justice system or its governments. We're at a point now where nobody has faith in the justice system. We feel like there's two types of justice. One for us, regular folk, and one for the elite. When we see people like Hillary Clinton not pay a price for all the corruption and illegal and evil acts that she's committed, but we get arrested for jaywalking, disturbing the peace, accused of domestic violence, and the woman is believed with no proof. This is the type of world we live in. So it's hard to imagine the truth not being exposed. Trump knows this. He's playing a role in this society that's it has to be intervention from God. It has to be. There's no way that this man, this outsider, can come in and shake things up as much as he's shaking it up, and we don't get a prize for putting him in office. That prize is seeing evil taken down, not reading about it, not predicting it happens and then nothing comes through, but the actual implementation of justice fairly and equally on everybody. 2020 is going to be big for that, super big. The enemy of the truth is going to pay a price. So as we know, for the entire Christmas vacation, Trump is spending it at the Southern White House. He's almost a neighbor of mine, actually. And he's been doing a lot of tweeting and a lot of trolling of Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff, the California rats that have been running California into the ground. And it's been funny as anything to watch. I mean, he even dropped a meme video. Oh, by the way, Twitter is filled with these meme creators. So funny. The type of comedy that's embedded in these things, I mean, it's almost like watching an entire stand-up show in about a 30-second clip. But Trump uses it brilliantly to get the point across. He tweeted out a video about, a tourist video, basically, of California. Come visit San Francisco, right? And instead of all the beautiful scenery and experiences that the narrator talks about you can have in California, you've got images of the homeless, drugs on the street, feces everywhere, crazy people yelling at non-crazy people. It's incredible because it does two things. First of all, it lets his supporters know that he sees all of this. He sees all of this anguish that we feel for these towns and these cities that are run by Democrats into the ground, into hell. But he also lets the people that are on the Democrat side of the political spectrum, what your political representatives have been doing with this country for at least 100 years. The Democrat Party after 2020 will not look anything like the Democrat Party of today. It would not look anything like the Democrat Party of Barack Obama. It's going to be shaken to its core, and they're going to have a long way up to rebuild. MAGA will be taken over in 2020. Just watch. Not only the House and not only the Senate and not only the White House, but we're talking about the message in media. The message in media. If these companies don't straighten up and finally start talking the truth to its viewers, there won't be any viewers left. They were able to keep a little bit of their viewership after the 2016 election disaster that they predicted to the people. They told people Trump was never going to win. Hillary was going to get it, 99% to nothing. All this BS, right? And they lost a lot of viewers, but they kept a bit. Not after 2020, though. Fool me once, shame on you. But fool me twice, shame on me. This is what's happening. Twitter is being used by Trump right now, and especially the last few days of this holiday vacation he's on. That isn't really a vacation for him because he's constantly working. Has been to hammer Nancy Pelosi's drunk ass into the ground publicly, and I'm in for it. I'm here. I'm enjoying it. It's funny. And of course, seeing the Q proofs also makes me a little happier. We got to start this year off right. Now, it would be wrong of me not to mention what's been happening in the Middle East. It seems like every week I should kind of touch on this. For a lot of us over here in the States, we don't really see what's happening on the ground. We kind of see the Middle East uprising, whether it's in Iraq or Lebanon or Yemen or Tunisia, the list goes on, as a second Arab Spring. But that would be the biggest mistake we would make because this is way deeper than any of us could imagine. Instead of people fighting back against a tyrannical government alone, what they've been fighting back against is the entire structure of sectarianism that's been riddling the Middle East in poverty and in dependence for as long as I could remember. Fighting against sectarianism is a dream that most secular people have had for the Middle East for a long time. It goes to the argument of, is the government going to represent the people as a people, or is it going to subdivide the people into groups that they can then leverage for their own political power and their own political dominance? And we're waking up again to the concept of the awakening. 2020 is going to be a beautiful year for the Middle East, and I'm talking specifically for Lebanon. I know there's a lot of confusion going on right now with this current prime minister. Nobody knows whether to trust him or not. You have people on either side. You have people that don't trust him at all because he's played a role in the government before. He was the minister of education for a while, I think a year. And you have others on the other side that are willing to give him a chance because he's been saying the right things. Right? I'll point you to one thing, and this is the only reason why I'm kind of sitting on the fence for now. When David Hale, a deputy ambassador to Lebanon, went down to visit a couple weeks ago, his attitude was also on the fence. Our message from Pompeo is a bit on the let's wait and see scale. So what that tells me, knowing how calculated Pompeo and Trump's foreign strategy is, that tells me that they're holding on to something with this Hassan Diab that they're not letting the people know. And I think it's because of the narrative. They know that the narrative can be switched and turned around on America to make it seem like anybody they support is an American stooge. The same thing could happen if Saudi Arabia came in and supported Diab. Same thing can happen if Iran comes in and supports Diab. That's one of the rumors that's been circulating around lately, is that Diab is some kind of puppet of Hezbollah. I don't know if that's the case. Hezbollah wanted Hariri to stay as the prime minister, and he failed. The powers that be did not allow him to take over, and I think that's for the betterment of the country. So if Hezbollah wanted Hariri and they did not get him, and then this guy gets accepted and put into this prime minister position after this whole debacle, it tells me that there's at least this reason to confuse the public about his plans for the country. I'm on the side of let's give him a shot. Don't let up the pressure. Keep protesting, keep doing what you've been doing. Historical movement on the ground, but give the guy a chance to see who he names as a part of his cabinet, because the willpower of the prime minister can really dictate the entire state of the country. The president, I know, is a fraud. The parliament, I know, is a fraud. But with this cabinet coming in, if it's ride or die, if it's a cabinet that's about to enforce the laws equally across the field, like we're hoping to see here in America, the parliament will be held to account, and so will the president and his party be held to account. Keep in mind, there are billions and billions of dollars at stake that no penny will see Lebanon unless these things are addressed. So there's a lot riding on this. Try to look at the bigger picture here. Hezbollah as a group is in a corner right now. They're unable to mobilize their people in the streets with real violence. They've been trying, but it's been very held back. They're unable to do that, which I think is their last card up their sleeve is violence. They won't do that knowing that the public will turn its back on them. And at the same time, they failed at keeping Hariri in the prime minister's seat. So they're in the corner. Funds are running out. Iran is under pressure. I think between now and the election of 2020, we're going to finally see the regime in Iran sitting down with Trump and working out a real deal. Not Obama-style deal where he sells out America for a country that's screaming death to America. Instead, a deal that stabilizes the Middle East, that keeps that regime in power so that they can be a good steward of the Shia sect, but at the same time, making sure people are held accountable across the Middle East. The stigma that the Middle East has in world communications or world conversations has to be lifted. We're better than these rumors. We're better than these labels. We're better than these presumptions that people have on the countries in the Middle East. At some point, we were technologically superior. Research and math and medicine, we did good work. And then these greedy, corrupt politicians took over their offices and milked their countries dry, their people dry. And thank God the people are waking up. I wanted to touch on it a little bit this week. I know there's a lot of aspects of this conversation that can be extrapolated on, but a little here goes a long way. And I want to end this episode a little short this week with a topic that's kind of out of left field. But I think it plays into this bigger geopolitical strategy shift that we've been seeing from the Trump team and from all the sovereign nationalist governments around the world, which is a shift from Russia being the boogeyman to real evil around the world being targeted. Real evil. Not the supposed boogeyman that's going to cause a nuclear war because they told us they will. Those days are over. The reason I want to talk about this is because something kind of unique happened over the last couple of weeks. NATO is shifting its troop movement from being Russia-focused to now being Africa-focused. What's the reason to want to shift the entire strategy of NATO from being anti-Russia to anti-terrorist groups around the world? It's almost like the real value of NATO is going to be exploited here and used in a positive way to help humanity instead of a sinking hole of money being spent for absolutely no reason defending against an enemy that does not exist, while Germany gets 75% of its resources, its natural gas resources from Russia, who they claim is their enemy. This veil of falsity and narrative is falling, and now NATO is being talked about shifting its focus to the Middle East and Northern Africa. To me, that's good. That's great. NATO has been involved in the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, but barely. They represented a fraction of the troop movements on the ground, a fraction of the money being spent in those wars. It was American taxpayers that were doing it under false pretenses. Macron, the shitty president of France, came out and said Russia is no longer an enemy. He wants to create a relationship with Russia. Hasn't Trump been saying this since the beginning of his campaign? Wasn't he called a liar and a Russian agent for assuming that was the case? Why does it seem like most of the world leaders are finally starting to get into step and quitting the bullshit they've been feeding the public for so long? Why? Because globalists have failed. The power structure of globalism is crumbling around the Chinese and around all of the CEOs that have been looking for the demise of Western civilization for the last 25 years. Since the creation of the World Trade Organization. George Bush Sr.'s New World Order has failed, and he died like a dog. Just like McCain died like a dog. World leaders have to stand up and face the facts. Face the music. Your people will not be lied to anymore. You cannot get away with your lies anymore. An educated populace is their worst fear. A populace that is awake and that is cognizant of what is right and what is wrong, what is true and what is false, is their worst fear. Your best bet, if you haven't started reading up on QAnon, is go start reading up on QAnon. Since October of 2017, information has been leaked from the deep crevices of the American government that has been so secretive and has been weaponized for decades now, has been weaponized against good, God-fearing people for so freaking long, is finally starting to leak, and the people are finding the connections between all of the lies across the decades. And it's shocking to some, but relief for most. Most of us knew deep down something wasn't right. This entire world structure, the financial structure, the media structure, the food structure, the economic structure has all been targeted or focused upwards. There was no trickle-down capitalism. There was only communism and crony capitalism, where a few got the biggest chunk of the pie. But that's because we've been coaxed into being sheep. We've been given false information to fall in step and follow the leader. Well, guess what? There's only one leader, and we're his children, and that's God Almighty. This is going to be the episode leading us into 2020. And if there was a message I could leave you with getting into this beautiful new decade, this is it. Wake up. There's too much at stake for us to be mesmerized by what Drake is doing, what Kendall Jenner is doing, what this next rapper, what this new independent rapper that just died off of his drug addiction. I don't care about none of it. Stop idolizing these dumbass people. If they grew up under the wrong circumstances, it doesn't mean that your wrong circumstances were valid or that you being a victim is a positive thing. There is no world for the victim. You are a victor in your own story. Start living like a hero in your own story. Start understanding that nobody will give it to you. You have to go out and take it. We're starting a new decade, people, a new decade. We only have a few of those, a handful of those in our lifespans. Make a real resolution. Not, oh, I want to lose some weight, or I want to stop smoking, or I want to stop drinking. Those are important too. You got to think about your health. But these are bigger narratives that we have to take account of. It's up to us to shape the future. Hollywood is not going to be the same in the next 10 years. The same gatekeepers that have been there, that have been choosing the scripts they want to fund, choosing the celebrities they want to raise up to A-list status, those guys will not be there anymore. They will all be paying a price for their treasonous behavior. Who's going to replace them? Trust me, it's definitely not going to be more of the same. It's going to be people like you and me, like the Clint Eastwoods of old Hollywood that didn't take shit from anybody. The Paul Newmans. They weren't forced to have a unified opinion on politics and on society like these dummies, Robert De Niro, Meryl Streep, and the list goes on. Listen, if I was sitting around waiting for Robert De Niro's opinion on who I should follow as a political leader, I'd look just like his ugly ass at 29. Hey, De Niro, stick to your alcohol and your high-heel shoes, you Napoleon complex dummy. 2020 is here. Be ready, be smart, be better people. Love thy neighbor. Love thy enemy. Anybody that's hurt you in the past, forgive them. When we hold grudges on people, it eats us from the inside. We have better things to do, bigger plans to achieve, and it's all about our destiny. When we realize our relationship with God is eternal, and through Jesus Christ we are forgiven, you will see the true nature of the world for what it is. It's a beautiful place that was meant to be heaven until some evil, corrupt people took it over and ran us into the ground. But guess what wins? Guess who wins? God wins. That's been episode 4. Thank you for listening, people. I really appreciate the handful of listeners. I really appreciate the support you guys give me. And I hope you guys could share the message, share the podcast. And another week, Red Zaatar. We out.
Warrior.